I'm just chatting to our next guest before the show about Sweden, but you'll get to that in a minute, that my knowledge of Sweden is dreadful, and I'm from Europe originally, but ABBA, IKEA, Wallander TV series and the books, one or two other things. But what I do know now about Sweden, it's in the news a great deal, is the influence of Islam and how the left-wing establishment seems to just bend over backwards. Very, very troubling stuff. Kent Ekeroth is an MP from one of the smaller parties in Sweden. Now, let's get the name completely right here. Well, welcome to you, by the way. Is it the Sweden Democrats? What is the actual title of the party?
Well, in Swedish, it's Sverigedemokraterna. If you translate it, it's Sweden Democrats.
Okay.
In English.
Right. Yeah, because my Swedish is very rusty, and I don't want to. But I mean, it's not a laughing matter. This story came to my attention. It was a gang rape of a poor girl, and the reaction to it. Tell us the story, please.
Yeah, it was an 18-year-old girl in a small city north of Stockholm that was assaulted, beaten, robbed, and raped by three men, immigrants, just the other day. And there's been a wave of rapes going on in Sweden just lately, and this is one of them. It was a gang rape. And after this incident, there were a right-wing extreme group that were handing out leaflets in the city to protest against immigrant violence against Swedish people.
Right.
So what happened was that the multiculturalists, the left-wingers, they decided to arrange a manifestation for diversity, after this girl being raped, which is totally insane, if you ask me. That's what happened.
So a group of right-wingers who we don't necessarily support, but what they were doing was legal. They were just talking about some of the violence taking place, which is true. And in reaction to this, instead of trying to look after the girl and care for the girl, they attack multicultural event. Now, I know the father of this girl is absolutely outraged. He's not political, but he said, how could you just don't seem to care about my daughter. She's being gang raped. All you care about is your multiculturalism. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I totally agree with these right-wing extremists. I do not condone them. I do not agree with them. But to hold a manifestation for what they call diversity and multiculturalism, when a girl has been raped by three immigrants, it's disgusting, to be honest. And the father, as you said, he wrote an open letter on the Facebook page of this so-called manifestation against racism. Mm-hmm. He wrote that, please, for my daughter's sake, don't do it. It's like a punch in the mouth when we heard about it. Yeah. And they took his message away on this Facebook page. And he also said, I'm going to leave town with my girl on this day because this is a disgusting display of what you're doing.
Absolutely incredible. Now, let's talk a bit more about some of the violence going on, because, again, we're not trying to target particular people, but this is not confined to Sweden. Throughout Europe, including in the United Kingdom, there are rape gangs. And it's not good enough for us to say immigrant, because in Britain, for example, it's not Hindu, it's not Sikh, it's not West Indian. These are specifically Islamic rape gangs, and they seem to think so little of women that this is the way some within that group behave. Is it the same in Sweden?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And there are rape statistics, even from an official government authority, that showed twice in a row that when you look at immigrants from the Middle East and Africa, mostly from Muslim countries, in the rape statistics, for instance, they are grossly overrepresented, more than 5 times the ordinary Swede. And we also looked at the rape statistics in 1 year. And then, for instance, the Iraqi minority in Sweden are overrepresented 10 times.
Wow.
Now, if you look at our neighboring country, Norway, 2 years in a row, so-called assault rapes, when someone is walking in the street, got assaulted and raped, 100% of those rapes were committed by immigrants or those who didn't even have citizenship. And it's the same thing in Norway, it's the same thing in Sweden. But obviously the media and the left-wingers and all the rest of them try to find different kind of excuses for it. Yeah. The one more imaginary than the other.
Well, tell me about this, because it's a good thing to have respect for all, and Canada, we're an immigrant-based society, and in Scandinavia has been extremely generous to newcomers. But crime is crime, and misogyny and sexism, targeting women, is a particularly repugnant crime. Yet the left throughout Scandinavia, and Sweden in particular, they seem absolutely terrified. They'll do anything. This is a problem within Islam.
Yeah, they are really, pushing it and not condoning what reality is, because multiculturalism. They're so stuck on the idea that all religions are equal and they are equally nice and good and fluffy, but they can't admit, after 30 years of lying about the multicultural society, about lying about the mass immigration, they can't really admit that they were wrong from the beginning, and that the rapes we see in Sweden, in Norway, in Europe, in America, in Canada, they have a cultural dimension to it. And as you mentioned before, it's clearly about different cultures valuing women differently. And they don't dare to admit it.
Now, I don't know if you know much about this subject, and we didn't ask you beforehand, but I've also read, and this is a Canadian learning about Sweden, and I understand, I hear comments about Canada from people who are not Canadian, and you think that just isn't true. But I've read that in Malmo, which is that the second city or the third city in Sweden?
It's the third largest city.
I heard in Malmo that the Jewish community, a large number, if not even now the majority of the Jewish community, has left because they're so frightened of and intimidated by anti-Semitic violence coming from Muslims in Malmo. Is that true?
Well, I don't know if it's a majority of the left, but it's certainly true that Jews are fleeing Malmo and somewhat also Sweden due to Muslim anti-Semitism. And I talked to the Jewish community in Malmo many years ago, and I told them, you can't sit quiet anymore and pretending it's not Muslim anti-Semitism. You got to go out there and you got to say who it is. And they didn't want to do it until recently. They finally admitted it, that the anti-Semitism in Sweden and Malmö doesn't come from white skinheads anymore. It comes from the Muslim minority that we are importing every day. And there's an example of such anti-Semitism from 2009. Sweden had a tennis game against Israel. And the left-wing mayor of Malmö, he forbid audience to this game because he was against Israel, right? There was a big demonstration in the streets, like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people marching against Israel. And in a part of this demonstration, there were an Arab group chanting anti-Semitic slogans, referring to when Muhammad killed Jews 1,400 years ago. Yeah. And this is on video on YouTube.
Right. What about the Swedish people? We always think of Scandinavia as being very tolerant and very welcoming. Ordinary Swedish people, how do they react to this? I mean, surely they're not part of that anti-Semitic group, and they must realize that Islam is the problem here.
Well, some parts do, and I think increasingly so. But the Swedish culture is one of to try to avoid conflict, try to have as much consensus as possible. And that cultural trait, combined with extreme left-wing media that we have, I mean, they made a survey, 75% of all the journalists in Swedish media are left-wingers. Yeah. 75%. So these two combined makes it very hard for ordinary citizens to actually go to the polling booth, go vote for the party that's going to make a change, and that's our party. Right. So I think more are realizing it. That's why we got into parliament 2 years ago, and that's where we're also growing. But unfortunately, it's not moving as fast as one could imagine it would. Right.
I find this fascinating. I'd love to get you back on the show because there are similarities. I mean, we're an enormous country. We're in North America, but I think part of the Canadian culture is quite similar to Scandinavia. It's very welcoming and generous and does want compromise. And I fear, I fear some of these issues will face us in years to come. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.